Good morning. I'd like to call the meeting of the Municipal Airport Authority to order. Paula just called. She's on her way in, so she'll be here in just a moment. We have a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Well, we've just approved the minutes, so item number 2 on the agenda is approve the airport vouchers totaling $654,389.97. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item number 3 is the individual vouchers A through M.
Motion.
Motion to approve. Second. Second. Is there any discussion on any of those items, A through F? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Item number 4, SP Plus. Craig, are you there?
Good morning, I am.
Okay. Want to take us through our latest parking study?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to walk us through our latest parking study there?
I sure do. Well, first and foremost, Happy New Year to everyone. I think the statute of limitation hadn't expired on saying that 3 weeks into the year. First time seeing some of you this year, so again, Happy New Year. Always glad to present the transportation study. This is actually our 11th study that we performed out at Hector International Airport. So with that, we performed the study on over a 2-day period. Again, small sample size, but it really gives us some key KPIs that we can use and leverage to make decisions moving forward. The 2 dates we chose was Tuesday, November 28th, and Wednesday, November 29th of last year. We asked 4 questions. We always try to keep it somewhat concise just to make sure we get, I guess, authentic answers from the passengers and they don't feel rushed to just get through the answers. So we wanted to know again, how did you arrive to the airport? And where do you live? We changed the, I guess, layout of that question just because a lot of people would tell us where they were born and different things like that. So we want to know, where do you currently reside today? And then what is the primary purpose of your trip, business or leisure? And we recognize business has changed since the pandemic. A lot of people mix business with leisure travel today. And so we put that caveat on there as well when we presented the question to the passengers. And then last but not least, this is always the wild card question, we call it. We decided to engage and ask about valet services, what the interest would be. Now that we recognize that a parking garage is on the horizon, and also wanting to look at different ways to mitigate potential losses of revenue. And not only that, make sure that we mitigate the fact that there is a certain passenger base that wants to park as close to the terminal, and they're okay with, or they're less price sensitive, I guess is the best way to put it. So we decided to introduce that question this year around. So with that said, again, we looked at the different numbers and brought it in on those 2 days. And 2,044 total employments is what we were looking at for that 2-day period. It's about 8% less than the previous study, if you will. That's to be expected somewhat. Again, the 2 days that we selected, just like the summer study, we had 3 of the 5 carriers that serve Fargo Airport. So with that said, it didn't have your less than daily service included in this number. And in many ways, we like to keep it that way, or at least mix the two, maybe rotate between these studies with that, just because we get the traveler that is accustomed to traveling out of the airport and not that traveler that travels once or twice a year, if you will. This is more of that frequent traveler. That way we kind of, again, get some really good feedback, particularly on question number 4. Once again, we had about 4 individuals from our team, different locations. We placed each other or stood up at different points. That way we can make sure we can catch as many travelers as possible. downstairs and also upstairs, just around security. So once again, 2,044 employments on that day. Of that number, we captured 38%, which is about 1% more than we did on the summer study. A little less than the winter study of last year, but again, winter study of last year, you had that less than daily air traffic on the days that we selected. So question number one, again, we always like to compare year over year, which is why I put a box around November 2022. But we also look at the summer as well, just because it gives us some good indication of the seasonality of travel there and how things change based off the season, if you will. So you'll notice that parked cars dropped down. That's the biggest variance, I would say, if you look at the first two rows across. And there's really a good explanation for this, particularly this time around, because I want to dig into it myself and see what drove that down, if you will. Most times you'll see the winter months that will go down in comparison to the summer months, just because the stay durations in the winter is much longer than the summer months. But I also said, let me go back and check and see if this is, again, small sample size, 2-day period. Let's see how it looked over the entire month of November. And so if we look at tickets collected for the entire month of November in comparison to year over year, the numbers actually are more. And if you recall last November of 2022, towards the tail end of that month, we had just opened the new East Economy lot. I want to say the day before Thanksgiving to be exact. So with that said, despite the fact that this 2-day survey period, you had a decrease in the number of individuals that parked. You had longer stay durations, meaning your revenue was not impacted adversely. But on top of that, your transactions, which we equate to tickets, were just as high as the previous November as well. Everything else pretty much stayed the same. Minor fluctuations in TNC and rent-a-car return stayed the same against May 2023, but obviously it's still down from November of 2022. One thing that's good to always look at as well is who's local and who's not. So again, that nearly stayed the same. If you look at the summer study against this past winter study, non-local slight uptick, if you will. California kind of replaced Texas as the state where more passengers were from if you take off North Dakota and Minnesota. So that kind of led the way, and that's represented on this pie chart right here. So that was a little surprising to see. It's always made the list, but the fact that it actually accounted for 5%, which is the highest single state aside from North Dakota and Minnesota, that was a little surprising as well.
Say, Greg.
Yes.
If when you say local, so is that Fargo-Moorhead, or is that just Minnesota, North Dakota when the respondents are responding?
It's just Minnesota, North Dakota.
Okay.
Yeah, we just pair the two together, and that gives you that local number of 64%. It's always good to understand, again, what makes up the traveler. Is it business or is it leisure? And we still see business is slow to return, the traditional business that we call, where you just literally pack a bag and go do business and come back. Again, with the ability to, telework or virtual work and work from your laptop now, we really truly believe a lot of the business travel is nested in this leisure percentage. And I think this is kind of the status quo now. If you look at May 2023, that's where things are. So I think we've kind of reached a benchmark or a baseline, if you will, of this is kind of the mix that we're going to see moving forward with business and leisure travel, which really is different from the business and leisure travel, again, pre-pandemic when we were performing these studies as well. Question number 4. So yeah, in previous times we would ask about, again, the parking garage and what rates and would a passenger use it and so forth. So obviously the winter months was always a strong, resounding yes. And even in the summer months, that question performed very, very well, but much stronger in the winter months. And similar valet services, we had a resounding 42% indicated they would use valet services. A lot of it had to do on those particular days. I'm pretty sure we were in the 30s or 20s from what I recall. So yeah, it has a lot to do with that factor, and really a lot to do with the factor these passengers really wanted to park as close as they could to the terminal, and they felt like it would be really nice to be able to drop their vehicles off, have the car warm when they're ready to pick it up, and so forth. And so we didn't get into the specifics of any price points and things like that. We just really wanted to have an understanding of if it would be of interest. And primarily this came up because this is a revenue source. Not to mention it's not just a cost center like a shuttle service or some other options would be if we were to look at putting valet in Fargo. So that was the biggest takeaway from this was that, and let me say this too, we only asked this to passengers that park. We didn't want to make sure we asked it to passengers that did not park, just because they likely would probably continue to get to the airport the way that they got there on that trip. So we didn't want to skew the data. We just wanted to make sure we asked the passengers that park would they use valet. And that's kind of how we tailor it as well at other airports. So in the summary, again, the dominant passenger base or way to get to the airport this time around was drop off. We did cross-reference that with the transactions for that month. And again, your transaction counts were not any less than last November. Your revenue was not adversely impacted, even though drop off, there was an uptick. And again, we suspect that and expected that going into it primarily because of the long stay durations. If you're leaving for months at a time, we think passengers are going to explore every option to get dropped off if they can. But you still have a long and strong passenger base that is willing to park their car for a month or more in one of your parking products. So that's the great news about this. And that concludes my report, but I am happy to answer any questions that you may have about this report or anything else.
Questions?
I have a question. So, Greg, when you're asking people, and I know it's hard to muddy the water and ask too specific a question, but I think it would be helpful for us if we knew who was like instead of North Dakota and Minnesota and determining if that's local or not. Like if you said, if you didn't arrive today from the FM area, how far did you drive to get to the airport today? Just, I think it would be helpful for us to know how far people are traveling to get to the airport. And then I think that impacts their parking decisions as well. Like if an Uber is an option for them or.
Gotcha. You make a good point. That's a big area that we're talking about, right? North Dakota and Minnesota. And so like how far into Minnesota or how far into North Dakota even. So we can definitely look at that as a follow-up question to those that do answer initially that they are from that area.
Because pretty much everybody's from North Dakota or Minnesota that's driving to the airport. Or I mean, probably not as many.
The good news is one thing that and not for that necessarily that reason, but I think this also helped with that question that you pointed out. And we could definitely do this as part of the transportation study, but in the interim, we've actually started to work with Cabu to capture zip codes as well for passengers that do park with us. So when they make a reservation, obviously that's just going to be for the reservation customers. That way we can have an idea of, to your point, yeah, they're local, but what define local even more, right? And so that's one of the things we started to do, and we should have some reporting back on that very soon. And that'll be year round. That won't just be when we do these transportation studies over these 2 days. That'll be when you make a reservation, give us your zip code, and then that way we can kind of, have an idea of the specific zip that you're from.
Mr. Chair, would it be the add of like, are you more than an hour away or less as a subset of that
I
question?
think it would help even with marketing when we're talking about like, are people coming from Canada or are we getting people from Grand Forks or Oaks or Fergus Falls, or are they coming from Alexandria? I mean, it would help us with marketing and just knowing, what our draw is, and that even so it would be helpful.
Yeah, we can narrow it down to city as opposed to state. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
Greg, Mr. Chairman, Greg, what Do you have any recommendations from the study for us? If you said there's two things coming out here that you'd recommend our airport authority do, or anything specific?
Really, we go into this, and the last time what came out of it was a parking rate increase, but you just started and did that effective January 1 of this year. And this study was done obviously before, 2 months before that. The only other thing would be, again, we went into this really looking for a way to mitigate the construction of the garage and just gauge the fact of, how people are getting there today and making sure we didn't erode those options once a garage starts to be built. So really, it's question 4 was the largest and biggest takeaway. Again, you just implemented a rate increase. We don't feel that's going to jeopardize any of your transactions, and that's been proven based off of the look of the ticket count. So it's just keeping an open mind and looking at valet as a potential option to mitigate the construction of the garage when you lose your entire short-term lot.
Good point.
I have another question.
Sure.
So keeping in mind that the respondents to the other part of the survey, like where we saw the comments, were only people that had made reservations. And I understand most people respond to a survey when they've got a complaint, but what are the advantages to the airport in having a reserve or a reservation system?
Great question. So really the biggest advantage is you're tapping into a market that you would not have ordinarily. If you did not have reservations on your campus, essentially, and this is tracked, and I can share some other reports with you that show these are new parkers or passengers that would not have been parking with you. It's tapping into that market that just wants to A, know that they have a parking space, and B, want to do everything at the same time that they're booking their travel. When I'm booking my flight, I want to book my parking. If you didn't have that on your campus or at the airport, then you really would be limiting yourself to just the transient parkers. So that's additional revenue, if you will, incremental revenue that you're tapping into. They would find another way to get there, do something different. That's the lion's share of that percentage of individuals that are making reservations. The second part of that is, since you have it paired with dynamic pricing, meaning that as capacity allows only, the price point adjusts accordingly, just like the airlines do, for that price sensitive passenger that's on the fence and says, you know what, I can do a TNC for $25, or I could park 2 days for X. All things being equal, a person wants to control their own fate, so I'll drive and park my own car. And that's what dynamic pricing does for you. If capacity does not allow for it, then you're going to pay the same rate as a transient parker. And so now you're able to pull from another base of passengers that are more price sensitive, that says, I'm always on the fence about how I'm going to get there. But because you have dynamic pricing and the space to accommodate me, I can park at your campus as well. And then the convenience of just not having, if they don't want to deal with anybody, and a frictionless passenger experience, which was huge coming out of the pandemic. They can do that, scan the QR code, gate arm opens, scan their QR code, gate arm opens, and leave without having to engage or interact with any personnel.
I did notice on the comments some people complaining about signage when not knowing which lane to exit through. Is that something that you're going to address or make some changes to?
Usually those survey comments like that, they all also email us as well. The timing of that, and I know I think the most recent months I sent you were September, October, and November. We saw more of those before we got the overhead signage at the exit plaza. So that would have been somewhere around earlier this year. And once we relocated the exit plaza. So there was confusion about that passenger that was used to going, make sure I get my directions right, west to exit as opposed to south. And so there was a learning curve there with, you need better signage to direct me to the new exit. And that was before we had those Daktronic LED signs as well. Since then, they haven't been as many, but even when there are those, they'll email us directly and we'll explain to them. And that's the good thing about this. The survey is really intended for a person to kind of just give their feedback after the fact. When they really have a question or a concern, they email us directly. I assure you that. And we are all on top of that. We have about 4 to 5 individuals, including myself, that take part in responding to those emails. So everything that you see in the survey, we address accordingly once we get feedback on it.
And so maybe the airport should have a different way to have a survey on our website, but right now the only survey is the parking survey. So I think it would be helpful, since probably the lion's share of our parking is non-reservation, to also hear the feedback and comments from the people that didn't only make reservations, but to see a wider broad of those responses. The people that took the time to fill out the survey, it would be nice to just make sure that we're responding to our customers.
Sure, and we're glad to lead the charge on that if interested. We can kind of develop something that works well with the survey that's there today, but to your point, captures the wider audience of who we're serving, for them to make comments on the website. We've done that a couple ways. We've done it through being able to scan a QR code and do it while you're there. Or just like you said, having it on the website, right side by side with the other one, or even marrying the two together to where it's one survey, regardless of how you arrive to the airport, reservation or pull a ticket.
Just so we can be more responsive to our customers. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Greg, and one question I just have, I can't remember, the meet and greet or whatever those parking spaces are we tracking anything usage there? My concern is, as we get into very tight spaces available, people are going to see those and be frustrated if they aren't being used. I don't know if my timing out here I just haven't seen anybody in them yet.
I've used them once or twice, but I get charged.
I'm sorry, say that part again, Paula?
I've used them once or twice, but I get charged. So, and it's not worth the hassle to, find somebody to rectify it. It's only a couple bucks, but.
So what I'll say is we're not tracking it scientifically. I'll say that, as far as anything that's automated or anything that I can provide in a report fashion. The local staff, the manager, they're eyeballing it throughout the day and making sure, just when they do their checks on premium reserve and so forth, to see, if it's being adopted. And we totally agree with you. The adoption's a little slower than we thought it would be, but we also think some of that is due to the messaging. And so part of this is with the parking guide that we're looking at launching in the next couple weeks at the latest. We have some language that we plan to put on there to explain what the purpose of the spaces are. It's also good, though, that we're not at capacity in the short-term lot. So there's not a definite or immediate need for those spaces for overnight parkers. But I will say this, too. It's worked really well in the sense of we have not received any complaints since we put those signs there about not having space. And that could be a combination of all of that I just said, the fact that we're not at capacity, but also I think the fact that there is dedicated space. They are being utilized, but they're not all full. I totally agree with you. So we're looking at that. We're glad that we've put to bed the concern and complaints that were present when we decided to go that option. But maybe, we're looking at it closer to see if it's too many signs or too many spaces, just to make sure we have the right amount. And we can always increase them if need be and scale back if need be.
I think as people learn that they're there, it'll help the congestion during pickup and drop off. So, well, thanks for answering so many questions. It's a big revenue generator for our airport, and it's important. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And the last thing I would just mention, and this only comes up once in a while, but we did have long delay days maybe a month ago. And so people spent 10 to 12 hours in the terminal waiting for flights to leave. And then finally the flights were canceled, and so just as a going away present, we charged them, $18 to get out of the lot after sitting here all day. I don't know if there'd be any way that we would have some capacity to provide some relief there or not. But, I just
So
have
we can we can do that. Whenever the most recent one prior to that one that I could recall was around Christmas 2022. And the passengers would reach out to us and explain that to us, and we would assist with relief in those situations. But yeah, I'm not sure about this specific one, but we could we're flexible enough to assist however you deem necessary.
it's just something, I don't think it's going to happen that often, but when it does, it probably would get us a little goodwill to just say, hey, sorry you got to spend your vacation, first day of vacation here at the airport. Hope you enjoyed your trip.
I think December 9th was like a big delay cancellation day, and some passengers were here for 7, 10, 12 hours, and then they leave after having a frustrating day and still have to pay for parking. So
Got it.
All right. Don't need to take any action there. Item number 5, Ide Bailey and the contracted services. Reed, Chad, stand in the star here on stage, and we're ready to go.
Perfect. Sounds great. Well, thanks, everyone. Once again, I'm Reed Matson. I'm a partner in our outsourced managed services department. We've got a couple of team members joining as well, Natalie Miller and Tana Osund. And what I'm going to do is just talk briefly through the proposal that you have here. I'm not going to read through it word for word, just going to give you some high-level overviews of a couple of items and turn it over to the team members remotely to join and just weigh in on a couple of aspects that we have included here. We'll also preface it by just saying that largely what's included in here is some of the things that we've come up with and built as a solution for some of the things that we've previously discussed, but just know that everything that's on here can be tailored, customized. We can still change and amend things as we need to. Very much kind of bones and structure to how this arrangement might work, and that some of the specifics might get fine-tuned later down the road. So the first page just really outlines some of our industry experience. So I'm not going to go into the details. Page 2 is really just some information on the department as a whole. Page 3 talks about the team that would be involved here, and really, like I said, a couple of individuals that would be intimately involved. Natalie and Tana on the team. I'll introduce here in just a couple of minutes. We'll let them talk through a few things, but really what we want to touch on is mainly on page 3 and page 4, where we outline what these services look like. So I'm going to turn it over to Tana, who's going to introduce a few things as we sit down and talk through this, and a couple of individuals, like I said, that are on here. Natalie works in our business planning and analysis team. Tana in our outsourced accounting, who would serve as that outsourced or fractional CFO role. And so it's going to be a combination of different individuals that are going to be able to assist and provide different types of services. And so, Tana, I'll turn it over to you. I know you were on the last call here, but you can do kind of a brief introduction, maybe talk through some of the different services that we have at the bottom, and then kind of wrap it up with Natalie and some of the different areas that she would be involved in the business planning and analysis, mainly around some of the financial reporting and some of the different areas around that.
Okay. Good morning. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. As Reed said, I am Tana Austin, and I would be part of the team at Ide Bailey. I do come with about 7 years prior airport experience as the director of finance. So airport business is familiar to me. So just to show you a little bit about our services, I'm going to go right down here and talk a little bit about our outsourced CFO services. So just from listening to some of the board members, getting some info, and also talking to Sean, we kind of came up that right now, the 3 biggest things for the outsourced CFO where we feel we could really play a role would be in organizing the overall financial reporting and dashboards, being a liaison between the management and the board, and then an advisory role for investment decisions. So just to talk a little bit about that, the big thing in all of this, I think, It's probably 3 words: cash forecasting and investing. And I think that's something we could really focus on. We could take some of the overall financial reporting, not taking away anything that Sean and Joan are already doing, but to build on that with additional reporting, some dashboards, charts, some KPIs that the board is wanting to see, not only just with operating, but with also your capital funds. And providing the dashboard reporting, I think when Natalie speaks, you're going to see how it can help consolidate a lot of information to possibly make the information more valuable to the board, to have it consolidated. The cash forecasting investment decisions, the day-to-day, I don't think at this time is where the concentration would be, but rather in the capital projects and the timing of each project individually and collectively. I've been able to take a look at where you have like a lot of your investments right now and maturity dates, and knowing that the Bank of North Dakota loan is out there along with federal and state grants and the AIP funding and everything. We could work hand in hand with the engineers and the others to get their schedules as to when they say this phase is coming due, here is the cost. We would step in and say, based on our cash forecasting and the investment model, here's how we are going to pay that first phase, and here's how we're going to fund each phase of the project going through. So I think that would be a very valuable service that we could provide to you as a board and an airport. I've also worked with multiple boards, so I realize that not every board member has the same focus. There are so many different focus areas within a board, but that's also what makes a board great, is so everything gets covered and everything gets discussed. So I think by working with each board member to just kind of get an overall feeling of what it is you want to see, and taking all of those conversations and figuring out how we could develop that into meaningful dashboards and how we can consolidate things to make it a valuable experience for you. iBailey has a wide range of expertise, and our team has the ability to customize and change reporting. So what we start out with might not evolve, it might evolve into something more, eliminating things, adding things, but we are able to make those changes throughout the time based on what you want to see. And that's kind of where our BP and A team comes in. So I'm going to let Natalie just kind of touch base on how their services tag team with the CFO side of it.
Yeah, hi everyone. So I'm Natalie, and I'm with our business planning and analysis team. And what we really do is we work to support our outsourced CFOs and internal teams with our clients. So we use a tool called Giraffe, and what we do is we integrate that with your accounting software so that every day the dashboards and things like that can refresh. So what we have are dashboards, reports, so we could use that to enhance what you guys are getting with your board meetings. And so we, like Tana said, really work with you to understand, what do you want to see? What do you like that you're getting right now? What do you want that's additional? What do you want to simplify, right? We want to give you information that you can digest. And then if you need more, have that detail available to you. And then I think the biggest piece where we would come into this is in the forecasting. So like Tana mentioned, understanding cash flow needs is going to be crucial going into these large capital projects. And so we use a software to do that. And our job, I like to say, is to just listen and then pick brains so that we can really translate the business plans into a forecast. So we do that using assumptions, drivers. We love to use non-financial metrics when we are able. And so one of the things that we've talked about is whether or not we want to get down to that level of detail. So when you look at what we have included, we have two different options. One is going to be looking at trended forecasting. So basically using history plus plans for the future to create assumptions moving forward. The second option is where we're going to get a lot more details And we're going to start using things like number of landings predicted, and start breaking down your financial statements based on which triggers need to be pulled to increase revenue or decrease expense, all of those types of things. Either one of these options, we're going to continue to work with your construction, your engineers, and lay out those capital projects. And what I think will be really key is that when we forecast, we're going to do it by business segment so that we can look at those capital projects in light of where those funding sources are coming from. I know that you have some limitations on what can be used for which projects, so we can help to lay that out as well to make sure that things are funded appropriately. So again, really working in the background to support Tana, to support your internal team, and then figure out what you guys need and create that information in the background for you. Okay.
If you look on page 5, we've got just an overall structure of what that pricing would be. The first line would be the initial onboarding costs, getting caught up to speed, understanding what it is that you want to see, customizing that reporting to understand really what's the most impactful for you as a board and for management. The last 2 lines would be what the recurring monthly cost would be. So second line would be for the BP&A, the business planning and analysis, and the third line for the outsourced CFO, which again, we've kind of got some rough assumptions there on the number of hours per month. That may vary, and again, that probably would be a little bit more upfront, a little bit hard to estimate what that would be in the initial phases, but looking at probably about that range from an ongoing perspective in terms of what those services would look like. And again, like I said, we've got the ability to customize some things here. So if we think there's more of a need for additional time, resources, considerations, we can ramp that up, or if we need to scale that down a little bit, we've got the ability to do that.
I do think, we're very excited to propose this. I think we have the right team, the right experience, processes, resources, the team with Giraffe, and it's the right time. We're being plugged into terminal expansion, the parking. We know how important the funding sources are, matching that up, looking out into the future, short-term, long-term, how important that's going to be. So really just want to supplement the work that Sean and Joan are doing. Like Reed said, this is scalable. This is something we can ease into and learn what works well for the board and the team. And so I think it could be a great fit at the right time for the airport authority.
Questions?
I do have, Mr. Chair. So we brought on PFM to help with cash flow analysis for projects and investment advice. We have First International Bank, and we have bookkeeping and accounting services that we use. What of those can you replace?
Yeah, Tana, I don't know if you want to mention that on the investment side. I do think that's pretty well taken care of. I've talked to Sean about that too. But Tana, do you want to comment on that as well?
Well, I think where we could take a look at with the PFM, from what I understand with them, they do charge you some type of management fee. And also knowing that the investments, where an airport can invest is limited. And so it's possible that we could take a look at those investments outside of PFM as they come due and find other ways to invest those monies. Not eliminating PFM completely, but helping to reduce those fees that PFM does charge. And I believe it is based on what you have invested with them. So it's something that, yes, we could take over completely from PFM, or we could keep them involved, but that would be a decision that we could build into our model based on their cost and based on what we could do, and have that be a board decision or recommendation. The bookkeeping side that you mentioned, Eide Bailly has comprehensive reporting, so I'm not saying that you would need to eliminate them, but I do feel that we could do a lot of what they are doing as well. But that would also be an internal decision for the airport as to what services you want to keep and which you would like to turn over to Eide Bailly. But if you're asking if we're able to do both of those services from those places? My answer would be yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I guess, so we went through an RFP process for our audit and tax preparation 2 years ago, Sean? 2 years ago. IDE was one of the contenders for it, but was substantially higher priced than the company we chose, number one. Not good or bad, I'm just saying that's a reference point. PFM, who we currently use, is the city's manager, and our fee is, I think, is it 11 basis points?
We're charging us 12 to 1,500 a month.
Okay, so let's say under 15 basis points. And so I guess before we should have a conversation about what the benefits and costs are before we ever make a decision on it, so we know in advance what that's going to cost us. And I know you can't give us that today, but we should have a conversation about that. What are those costs? Where are they more efficient? Where aren't they? And then if they aren't more efficient, what is the offset to what is provided compared to those services we're getting now?
Other discussion.
No, I think that's a really good point. I mean, I think the issue here is we've been working directly with these different vendors for years and years and have never changed. And I think what we're talking about here is how do we hire someone to be on the same side of the table as our board and our staff? So they can say, okay, where is our best return? Where is our lower cost? That type of thing. So I think that'd be a good area for us to explore, and potentially finding some more efficiencies and savings that could go a ways to offsetting the cost of what we're looking here in a monthly deal. I guess the question, just following on that, are you working in other cases with, again, other bookkeeping firms or other investment? Are you providing, I'll call it, this investment advice to other clients?
Natalie or Tana, you can maybe talk on the specifics, but probably not exactly something in the same situation as this. I would say every business's and every organization's situation is a little bit different and unique on where that focus area is, and that's really where we try to hone in on is what are the needs, how can we try to build a solution for those needs.
Yeah, and I would just add on that all of our clients tend to be in very different situations. So we've got clients where we do everything start to finish, the bookkeeping, the reporting, the forecasting. We've got clients that have their own internal department and we work well with them. So I think in your case, we just come into what's working well for you, what's not, and we fill those gaps. So we're happy to kind of tailor it.
I think the journey we've been on to get here is how has this board functioned with its financial operations, and that it's an area that we haven't had a dedicated position for. And so, when we started with this was to look at a CFO position. We put dollars into the budget to hire the CFO position, started down the road of trying to define a job description, some movement back and forth. When we got to this position where we said, we aren't exactly sure, and Rick, your point is the first part of this, the initial onboarding and the business planning and analysis, I think is going to be very critical. But this allows us to find our way into this and where we can add the most value as we go through it. My concern is the things that we have, as you identified, we've got various pieces. We do not have somebody looking over all of those and making those decisions. And this may be another layer on top of that, but I think we'll achieve the efficiencies that we're looking for. Right now, we've got PFM making investment decisions. We've got First International doing some short-term investment. Nobody is sitting on top of all the cash saying, you know what, maybe we should increase the amount at First International and drop PFM. What's it going to look like as we start working through $200 million of construction for the next 3 to 4 years? The timing on all that as we work through this. The matching of sources and uses, and making some critical assumptions and decisions going forward. So that's where I look for these things, not the replacement of existing services, but the enhancement in the overall coordination to get more efficiency from the whole system. This, to me, allows us into a situation, I hate to say this to you guys, but as we would work through this would probably evolve to a CFO position instead of the outsourced solution that we're working with right now. But we've got critical timing issues that are going to be coming up on cash flow. And as we've looked and even see what's potentially going to happen with grant dollars, and the grant dollars being received over different tranches, different years, all this is going to be critical. And I think it's vital that we start this process and get moving on.
I mean, I think, Mr. Chairman, part of this whole process is we were part of the city's accounting until, what was that, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that? John, when was that switch?
We started January 1st, 2022. We took over our own
So that's 2 years ago.
in our second year.
And I think from my perspective, we've done a great job getting different vendors to do things. But I also, from my perspective, is long term, that can be dangerous, managing your business out of the checkbook. So my big fear is we're going down this journey of $200 million in construction. And when this is all done, I want to make sure that we can pay for it when those bills are due. And when all the dust is settled, I want to make sure that we're cash flowing. We're a strong cash flowing position as an airport going forward. So that's where I'm, again, that's been my quest for like the last 6 months. And I don't know if I've been at a level of comfort yet. I don't know what specifically the role would be in option 1 or option 2, but I think, you know, we've been working with Chad, and certainly he's worked with our team and our partners, hasn't really taken over, but he's leveraged what Leibowitz and Horton has done. He's leveraged what Mead and Hunt's done. I mean, I think it's been a way to take this complicated financial piece and break it down into kind of plain English for me anyhow. So again, I appreciate that, and I think even if this is just something that we did for the next 2 years as we go through construction, I think it would be well worth our time and effort to have you on board. Even from a liability standpoint, the last thing I want is to end up, you know, with an upside down thing on the construction that we can't afford that's done, and a negative cash flow when this thing is done for the terminal. So,
Do you like option 1 or option 2 then?
well, I guess, you know, I'm not sure. I guess what I think is, maybe my question is, knowing what we've done with IDE to this point on all the cash flows and what's going to happen, how do we, you know, I look at option 1 and option 2 just kind of getting set up. I don't really think we need to create a lot of different stuff. I mean, I think we can use the trending and use what people are doing. So I guess I'd defer that back to IDE and Chad.
Yeah.
If we continued kind of with the idea that we're going to monitor the things we're looking at, provide some of the additional services that we've talked,
Yeah.
and then as we get into it, I think if we need to expand in other areas that make sense, we can look at that.
Reed and I talked about, you know, does it make sense to start with option 1? And if you find value, if you want more, sometimes, you know, you may ask more questions. We want to see more reporting. We want to see these different things transition into option 2. That's
You said you think starting with option 1 makes sense. Is that?
Well, I don't want to speak for the team, but
Yeah, and Natalie, you can weigh in here too. But probably easier to start with option one, and then if we need to, build in some of the additional assumptions and some of the additional variables to get into option two.
Yeah, in talking with Tana too, because we even looked at some things that she did in her prior experience with airport authorities. We think trended is a good place to start. Your capital projects are going to be modeled the same either way because we're going to be working to get schedules from the construction companies. So I think option one is great. And then when we start looking at the forecast and analyzing it, if you guys start asking questions like, well, what if we changed this or we pulled this trigger? That would be where we maybe start dipping into more custom using those non-financial drivers to forecast things out. But based on what we've discussed, I think trended is good. You have pretty consistent revenue streams, and the capital projects are where we really need to spend our time.
I think we're sort of at option 1+ with what we've been doing now.
mhm.
Yeah,
We sort of have this piece off there as we work, with parking revenues and blending in the construction and the construction costs and everything else. But I think we could start with that.
Yeah, let's let things evolve and continue the discussions and see where the needs land. But this is a great starting point.
Mr. Chair, as we just got this last night or yesterday, I would ask that I'd like some more answers to the questions I brought up about how you would integrate with PFM the current business model of our bookkeeping accounting system, how you would integrate and do that. I'd like to understand that to see if there is overlap, if there isn't, if there's a replacement. I'd like to understand that more.
Now, your current bookkeeping is done in QuickBooks Online, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so from the reporting and the forecasting perspective, we're going to capitalize on that information. We're going to pull that in, and that's going to be the basis of what we do within our system. So we won't be doing any bookkeeping. Tana, I don't know if you want to jump in on how you'll be reviewing and analyzing from there.
Well, that would be, I guess we would have to discuss that because I know that the bookkeeping, your other bookkeeping, they do provide you dashboards and stuff at the end of each month. But I would be in QuickBooks as well, working with Sean and Joan just to see how that cash flow is going. How it would integrate with your current business model, we would have to work with them to figure out what they want to continue doing or what you guys want them to continue doing and how we can build on top of that. Like we said, we don't want to come in and step on anybody's feet or take anything away from anybody, but to continue to build on what you have. Go ahead.
I guess I'm not worried about stepping on someone else's feet. I just want to know if we're going to commit to use you. I'd like to know what we're going to use you for and in what capacity for each of those items before we make a decision. That shouldn't be that's more like check the box. What are you going to do? Explain what in this capacity you can do. And that shouldn't be very speculative, I don't think, is it?
Well, I understand what you're asking for, Rick. Some of this is a discovery process as we go forward and look at how we blend these things together. But my concern is we are currently right up to the cusp of having some very critical decisions made on bid packages, payments, all the things that we need to rely on that we currently don't have in place at this time. And so I would encourage us to go ahead and to take this step to look at implementing option one and starting down this. This is not a long-term contract. Is if we're 6 months into it. There's outs for it, but I believe we're going to find the benefit to this to far outweigh the cost. I'm confident in these type of services being able to pay their own way. And one way to get into that is to start the process. But I would just advocate at this point, we can continue to study this, but what we're going to start getting into here very quickly is we have to figure out what the timing of the payments and what the timing of the construction is to keep this moving forward. We're going to start to see some problems develop. So I would encourage us to take the step, implement option one, and get this underway and going.
You know, for what, you know, you're asking what you would get from us. And I guess it goes back to what I initially said, is that I don't think, you know, your daily operations, the reporting you get from that, that sounds like it's all working. If that isn't working, and if I have discussions with the board and they want to see more, we can build on top of that. But I think where the focus would be and where the board is maybe looking for is the reporting on the capital projects. I mean, do you want to see monthly? We could give you dashboards where the project is, the cash that's, you know, locked into the pipeline, the bills that are yet to come. Those are the dashboards that we can kind of lay out project by project and then as an overall. So the board would have a really good look at where are you at for projects? Where is money coming due? Where is money coming in? You know, with the grant monies that you're going to recap, because you get 90% back from some of the federal funding once you pay some of the bills. And so it's laying that out very clearly so the board can see the cash flow by project. As far as your operating reports and things like that, we don't need to touch those unless there's something more with the day-to-day operating that you want to see. Then we can sure build on that. But I think our focus would be on the capital and laying out each project and showing you each month where you are at, where your cash is at. And then, you know, have open conversations as if there's options of where to get cash from. Those, I think, are things that we could provide monthly. And how we work with PFM, we would take a look at that because they have your investments. So as those investments come due, can we get better rates outside PFM? Do we keep it in PFM and pay the management fee? What's the cost ratio each way? So I think that's something that's looked at every time an investment comes up. And do we want to invest more short term or more long term? Because right now we know that money markets are 5.25. CDs on short term rates are up there, and that's where First International comes in. That for now you could invest the monies there and save some of the management fees with PFM. But as the markets rise and fall, especially during an election year, we would have to take all that into an account.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, just kind of to clear one thing up, I think there's two buckets on this capital project. One bucket is what we're going to hopefully be making decisions on here rather quickly, but that relates to what are we doing, what's the phases on the new terminal expansion. And so I think we currently have a contract with IDE for that, and with Leverwitz and Horton and Mead and Hunt. And so I think that needs to come together, and we need to make that decision. Then I think going forward, when that decision's made, it's just making sure that we're on track. And if we fall off track, then we're going to need some help in figuring out what's plan B for funding the project. So I think that first IDE project gets us through a lot of what we've been wrestling with here for the last 6 months. This is kind of a difficult thing because obviously this is expensive. And quite frankly, we're kind of doing all those things now with the staff. I mean, I'd like to hear Sean's perspective on working with IDE and you know, I think I've been clear on how I see the potential benefit, but it's going to be key Sean, how you feel this. Do you feel this is going to benefit what we're trying to accomplish? End up at the end of the day with a positive cash flow, or what's your feeling on it?
Well, if they can bring forth tools to help with the cash flow projections of the projects with the uncertainty of when the federal funding, well, we have an idea of when federal funding will be announced. It's just the amount of federal funding, we have no clue what it will be. If they have the tools that can help to project those things out over the 3 to 4 year construction period, I think that would be valuable. You know, the day-to-day operations and the internal accounting, we have a handle on that. In fact, balance tax and accounting was recommended by Brian Stavager. That's why we have balance tax and accounting behind us, working with Brady Martz to make sure the audits and so forth go forward and the general ledger and stuff is updated. That came from Eide Bailey as they helped us in the transition away from the city accounting system to what we're doing now with QuickBooks. So we're working with a firm that they had confidence in that would get us there because of the size of the operation that we are.
Say that last part again. Didn't quite hear you.
I mean, they had confidence in the firm that they connected us to do that. So the day-to-day stuff, Joan and I, along with Christy and Jamie at BTA, have that handled. Tana was given access to QuickBooks last week, so she is on our account, so she can go in and take a look and see. And you know, the dashboard thing has been all over the place on the board. Some want the dashboard, and others want the guts and the details. So that's a decision each board member is going to have to make. What do you want to see when the monthly financials come out? Some want everything, some just want one page. And you know, with Tana's assistance and familiarization with QuickBooks, we can create some dashboards maybe that might make some sense, I guess, if you will, based on what we have now. BTA can do that as well.
Sure.
So from that standpoint and the urgency of getting, and I know Oliver and the McGough team that are here, they're going to be revising their cash flow projections for the project as different bid packages are put out. You know, the safety net that we had with the $40 million loan from the Bank of North Dakota isn't there for the terminal now if you're choosing to put that all towards the parking garage. That was kind of the safety net that up until about 2 months ago was in place. Now that's not there for the terminal. So the terminal planning for McGough and the team is going to be much more critical going forward to make sure that the size of the bid packages are going to match when we have cash available to pay for it. And then Tom is going to get into some stuff here in a little bit that will explain a little bit more. But if it's bid package one, you know, Tom and I, Joan, we go back quite a ways with her involvement at Grand Forks. I have a lot of confidence in that. But if that's where they want to focus on it, I think that would be very beneficial.
Well, I guess, Mr. Chairman, this is kind of like, from my perspective, I'd like to go forward with Eide. We're probably just in that first column on trying to onboard. I'd really like to see Eide work directly with Sean and the staff to figure out how they can enhance our financial stuff rather than duplicate or eliminate anyone. And once we get into it, we may find there's some real savings by doing something different. But I guess, so that's kind of my question to Eide, really. What could be our step to say, yes, we're really interested and we're willing. We don't want to just spin your wheels, but we're willing to kind of do the onboarding. But you need to figure out what that onboarding actually is and how that's going to help us.
Sure. Also move forward with like a proof of concept to do some
kind of
initial discoveries and building of reports and say this is kind of what the end result would look like. Is that a direction you want to move forward on?
I would really like that. And I think that would answer Rick's questions. We get into it, some of these others as well.
Yep, that's fair.
So provided a ton of information to Tano already. So
right.
He's
And
got access
who would
to
be your point person? Have we determined that?
Yeah.
That would be Tana?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Awesome.
So, Mr. Chair, one of my primary questions would be in the process, or the value would be for half of the cost, the monthly cost, are we getting enough cash flow analysis to be comfortable as a board 3, 6, 12, 18, 24 months out? There's got to be a number of value there. And if it's $3,000 of value, it's probably worthwhile because there's enough other ancillary things done. So Sean, is that portion, the cash flow and modeling, worth $3,000 a month? Because it really boils down to you and the staff.
It's something to grow into. I guess we won't know the answer to that until they get into it to see how long it's going to take to put that together. You know, and as far as the PFM investments, there's 20-some million there as the maturities grow. I would say by January 1st of 2025, there's not going to be much left in that PFM investment account because we're going to be spending it on paying for a parking garage and also the terminal. There won't be a lot left there.
Well, once again,
If we're able to save 1% on that 20 million throughout the year, it would more than pay for. So I guess with this discussion, I don't know, Joan, what you're going to write down if I make a motion. You always really, really well. Babble on and on. But I would move that we move forward with the first step of onboarding and coordinating with IDE in the CFO position, and work with our staff on fine tuning that, and then maybe come back in whatever is appropriate and take that next step.
Sure.
So what do you got there, Joan? Want to read the motion?
To move forward with the first step of onboarding and then continue to work with the staff and come back to the board for the next step.
Perfect. I would make that motion.
I'll second it.
A motion in a second. Just to clarify it, the onboarding, can you do that in a month?
I think Natalie had to hop off for 9 o'clock, so I will verify with her and get back to you right after this.
Right, because
Just to confirm.
we would, from onboarding, move into the monthly very quickly.
Sure.
So just so we're ready for that, or even by our next meeting, which would be second Tuesday of February
14th.
Well, I think, have them coordinate that, but we're still working with IDE on this modeling for our cash flow pro forma.
Yep. All right.
So, Mr. Chair, a question. So the motion is to start the process and understand better what those integration parts are going to be ultimately. Is that the goal? Because we can't answer a question if we don't know the question. You don't know it either. So is that the goal?
Yeah, and I hear you as let's get onboarded. Let's proof of concept. I think Reed said, which I think is good. That's the beauty of these services. I mean, if you're not finding value of it in month 2, 3, 4, we pivot. But I really think you'll find value.
Yeah, I mean, I think we want to show our intent that we want to move forward with this project with IDE. And so, by doing that, giving you the tools and the access to figure out how best to work together.
I don't believe the onboarding is going to take as long as you're thinking. I mean, Tana's got 90% of the information already, so. Yep.
Well, and the next piece of this is we do have an obligation to the city commission to do a presentation still on the whole project. And so we are going to need some of this information as we go forward. The city's looking towards. So, all right. We have a motion and a second. I believe everybody understands the parameters of the motion. Call the roll, please.
Hang
Aye.
Berg.
Aye.
Captain.
Aye.
Excellent.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Item number 6, the parking garage elevated walkway. Sean had a call. Terry Stroy is not able to join us.
Yes, he
And
did. There was a Terry on there for a little bit, and then he dropped off.
okay.
But then he did send a text that he's not able to join. Parking garage is still on track. I don't know if Oliver or Rich have anything from your meetings on the garage to add.
I think more just kind of continuation of what Terry shared last time is that we're working on a set of PD drawings and a set of drawings that we'll be able to procure the precast off of. So,
Excuse me, can people online hear? See, everyone's kind of.
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we can hear.
Good.
Okay. Let's see. I'll take the start.
No, that was just a test because I think this is really an awesome way. And in the past, when I've been online, I haven't been able to hear very much. So,
yeah. So, what the design team is working on are continuing to refine their drawings, which they'll issue in about 2 weeks. The DD package, which will in turn take and update our estimate off of. More information there, we'll get tighter numbers. Then we'll bring that back to the board and present that. And then probably the biggest thing is that there's going to be another package of drawings that will go out to the market for precast. It's about a 5-month lead time. So in order to make an expedited schedule, we need to get a precast company on board so that we can get kind of secure our spot in line, and then they're going to work with Stro to finalize the design and exactly what the panels are going to look like, color, texture, etc. So same timeline. In about 2 weeks, we'll have that set of drawings. We'll go out for public solicitation, public bid, and then bring those. Make a selection, bring that back to the board for approval.
Timelines kind of staying the same. We're just slipping.
Correct. Yep. Timelines are staying the same.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
All right. Item 7, General Expansion Project funding status.
Brandon is online, so maybe, I don't know, you guys partner on this, or Tom, want to go first?
Let me go first, and Brandon can tell me where I'm wrong, and we can go through that. I have just 2 quick slides to talk off of. One, I just want to give a little bit of update on the different efforts. A lot of you probably heard some of the briefing on the trip to DC, where we had the mayor, board chair, Rick, Kyle Warner, the director of North Dakota Aeronautics, Sean. Effort for that was to improve the airport's ability to get federal funding. And so I want to go over a little bit what we're hearing right now, rumbling through the system. I'm going to go to the next slide, Darren. As we've seen in some of the past presentations, we have a couple different funding avenues, so I apologize for making this confusing, but I know it's really important to you. One, you have the Airport Improvement Program, the entitlements. That's what the airport gets on a yearly basis, predicated on enplanements. So that's kind of a set. We know what's coming each year. Ballpark with that, it varies, like I said, on enplanements, but it's a reliable income coming into the airport. When you have some of the things like continuing resolutions, what that does, it slows that process down, but in 30-some years, I've never seen it stop. And like when you see government shutdowns and things like that, that delays it. But we've seen this happen for many, many years, so I'm not worried about that. Discretionary funds are competitively sought after with different airports. We were at a meeting last week on the FAA talking about a variety of things with the airport. They didn't come out and say it, but all indications and undertones was that the airport is likely to receive discretionary funding. What that dollar amount is, we do not know. But I want to let you know that those are good. I can tell you, I sit in a lot of airport meetings, and the airports or the FAA is like, yeah, you're not getting money. They'll be very honest about when you're not getting it. When you're getting it, they kind of keep their mouth shut, or there'll be things like, making sure the plans are there to accommodate that funding when it comes in. So that's exactly what we'd be hoping to see at this point in the time. That's what we're seeing. Those, again, are offshoots of the success of all the players that went to DC and those efforts. So one of those things, if you see Senator Hoeven, make sure you give him kudos. We appreciate all his efforts on that. Same with the mayor and people on the board that went. That was exceptional. The bipartisan infrastructure law, the airport improvement or airport infrastructure grant, similar to the passenger entitlements, predicated on equations. Those are relatively a given expenditure. For the bill, it's a 5-year program. That's all on track as we would anticipate. The airport's terminal program, which is one of those, again, that we're competing with other airports to get funding for. And we'll go in just a second to show what those numbers are that we're asking and why. That one as well, indications from just people inside the FAA, all the undertone comments are positive. I can tell you I've worked with other clients of mine that have received calls from the FAA that says, well, if we gave you $2 million, would you go forward with your project? We're not getting those calls, so that's an indication that we're competing well. We'll talk about what that well means like in just a little bit. So I just wanted to make sure that the board understood those efforts, and that trip was, I think, highly successful. So I thought that was good to note and just give you an update on that. The other item is supplemental funding. That is an additional pot of money. The FAA kind of said they were hoping to get that announcement out for what they call a NOFO, or Notice of Funding Opportunities, out in December. It's a separate set of funding. A lot of times we'll see the congressional earmarks come out of that pot and the remaining go out in a competitive nature to airports across the country. We're poised and ready to compete for that funding as well. And our trip will suffice to help bolster our position. There's a lot of different funding mechanisms, as you've just seen. And our goal is to ask any opportunity we can to get federal and state funding. Because at the end of the day, you guys have a lot of things going on with the parking garage, with the terminal. We want to position you so that all these worries about cash flow slowly get resolved with additional funding from both different sources. So having said that, I want to just wrap up. One of the questions that we see coming out quite a bit is help us understand the different numbers that are floating around. So I tried to capture this in a very simple manner. And so if you go back and look at any of the presentations that I have provided, and I'm going to distinguish that between that and Leibowitz and Horton, what we put forward was a column there called preferred. And it's a total package, $154 million roughly for the terminal apron, the walkway to the parking garage, and then there's some employee parking that's the replacement of that ground employee parking. So we put all that together into one. And there's reasons from an FAA standpoint we do that for their priority system. So that's what's captured in that overall $154 million. So as we go through this funding, our request is to get as much federal funding as possible. So we said at the beginning of this is our goal was to get as much as possible. We have the passenger entitlement, which is roughly $22.7 million, what was in ours. Leibowitz and Horton threw in one additional year of entitlements, and that's why you see the additional roughly $3.5 million. We try to minimize if we can.
Maybe you should explain that entitlements, how the money is derived at.
Okay, the passenger entitlements, as I said earlier, that comes on a yearly basis, and that's predicated on employments. So the airport gets those on every year. They get them, and they have a sign where that money goes to, usually to the FAA through a capital improvement plan that goes in September, August timeframe. So that's money that you can.
We're kind of funding that ourselves, right? It's employments that go into that pot.
Right. It comes from the general, the trust fund of the airports organization on a national level. So that gets paid out by the FAA. It comes in under a grant.
We're dedicating our passengers.
Yeah, you're dedicating your entitlements to that portion of the project.
Right. So if we didn't do that, we would get that as cash flow.
You would get that towards some other project. It has to be a capital project eligible for federal
use that for something else at our airport if we didn't dedicate it to this.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's our okay.
It is allocated to Fargo. That dollar amount is allocated to Fargo on a yearly basis. So what you have there in the passenger entitlements is really it's the passenger entitlements. It also, and I should probably correct this on the slide, it is also the airport infrastructure grant merged to that. They're both predicated on employments. So that you would get on a yearly basis allocated to Fargo. Leibowitz and Horton was thinking that with the FAA, they put one other year of entitlements into that. I'm one of those, unless the FAA asks for it, I'd like to keep it for other projects you have on the books. So again, we have our preferred versus what we had from Leibowitz and Horton. Airport discretionary.
Tom, why is it different? 22. Why is the numbers different? 22.7 to 26.3.
Because Leibowitz and Horton had allocated one additional year of passenger entitlements.
Oh.
And so what my goal is to minimize the airport's use of their entitlements so that at the end of the project, you have that $3.5 million that could be put towards another capital improvement project, whether it's an apron, a taxiway, something else that you would like to do.
Okay.
So again, keep in mind, my goal on the preferred side is to give you, the airport authority, the greatest amount of money from federal and state organizations and minimize your cash use so that at the end, you're not financially distressed.
Well, Tom, Mr. Chairman, this is kind of a challenge as a board. So the preferred is what we laid out for Hoven. And if you look through that, our cash that we would put in is it's about 6.8 million. Right. And this is 21.7, but that's also a revenue stream that we captured.
Correct.
So that's not just cash reserves there. What we're saying is that then this alternative one is kind of best guess. None of this stuff is in writing. And this is kind of the challenge. If we look at either of those, but if we look at the preferred, the only, none of that
I mean, what do we know for sure that we have in the bank? It's about maybe 50 million, right?
The numbers we know for sure that we're I'm just up here in points. It's easier for me to do that. The column right up here, entitlements AIG, this would be items that I would say are relatively, we can rely on that coming in. That number, North Dakota Aeronautics, generally you can expect that level of funding for them over a 2 or 3 year process is not a significant amount of money. So these two are the only two that you can really lock your horns on and say, this is really coming in. So these efforts where we're fighting for competitively to get these additional funds is critical. So when we look at it in the preferred manner, discretionary, by law, you cannot use discretionary funds for your terminal building or your parking garage. So when we say it's for the apron, it's because it can only be utilized for the terminal apron.
Tom, on the apron, that's the one that skews everything. We never have any identified revenue for the apron in the grants. If we don't have those grant dollars, we can't do the apron.
You would have to use your local funds to do it if you don't get additional. Right. Yes.
And John, I would defer to you, but we would patch and repair and everything else.
We're talking two different things. One is the expansion of the apron, concrete that's not there today to accommodate the east expansion. What you're referring to is the reconstruction of the existing apron. We would defer until we have federal money.
Exactly. So really what you have going on here is let me walk through this real quickly and we'll go back to that very exact issue. So as we go through, we have the different funding allocations. I want to talk real quickly about state and then come back to that apron discussion. So we're also working with Sean and 2 other airports in the state, as well as the state director, to put together a state strategy to compete well for that $40 million that you see the direct allocation. So let's say we go all through all these, and as Sean talked about early, the federal funding, we can tell if we're competing well, we don't get that number, and it's kind of frustrating because we're trying to make the funding plans for numbers we don't know, and the FAA will not give us until they've blessed it through the whole process. So as we go through this, we have to be nimble, we have to have flexibility. So let's say this doesn't come through as preferred or alternative. What do? Does the project stop? Well, we have some things talking about the apron. We have one which is a new apron that's going to abut the new expansion. That has to be there because you can't function without it. So let's say we don't have money. We also have for your other portion of the apron that's in existence. That apron is in critically poor condition. So something needs to be done. I believe we've done a patch on it to kind of keep things from creating FOD or creating foreign object damage to the aircraft. That will be a short-term fix. If we don't get funding, that project doesn't move forward. We limp that along. It may not be a great investment on your money, but you do what you can with the money you have available. So as we look at all these different numbers, they all fit into, what if scenarios. So one of the things we are doing is we are working with McGough and laying out their timelines along and marrying that up with the funding timelines and when we anticipate funding so that we can sequence the terminal projects to the funding that we anticipate and the timelines we anticipate for the federal government. We met last night. We met a couple of weeks ago too. So we've been working on it for a while. We think in the next week or two we will have something that will help bring some clarity to the board on those sequencing and timing. So one of the things like Sean had talked about, now that we have clarity from the board on the $40 million loan is going to the parking garage, it puts us so we can clearly go, okay, here's the numbers that have to fall into place and makes it, I think, to my opinion, a little simpler for us in the sense of we know where we're at. It's more complex because that cash flow issue that Rick talked about earlier and worrying about that is real. So we have to look at those elements. We're putting together a couple different documents that are hopefully simple and clear that marry the timeline of construction with the likely funding. Where there are gaps, we'll talk about those gaps where either you delay the project, reduce the project work, or you pay for it with your own cash reserves. So there's different things that you can mitigate that in different ways. So as we go through there, we're going to try to give you a what-if scenario to the best of our ability. I realize there's a lot of moving parts in this, but that's what happens on a yearly basis. we are anticipating, if I was going to bet money on my end, the types of money we're asking for, so let's just use ATP. We were hoping to find out about that last week. I know from friends of mine, it was briefed by at the secretary's level. The Secretary of Transportation blessed it. So I just texted the person 10 minutes ago, 50 minutes ago, and said, where's this at? I always thought this was coming out next week. And as often happens in the government, the system gets tied up in itself. They're now pushed the date to February 6th is when they believe that announcement is, but they're still pushing for it as soon as possible. One of the things as we go through this process, we anticipate we're asking for roughly $27.1 million. We would anticipate that coming in probably a 2-year time frame to a 3-year time frame. So when we get the announcement, if we hear anything from $10 to $15 million, that would, in my opinion, be a success. And that's looking at the last 2 years of allocation of this type of funding. So as we go through this is what we're working on behind the scenes, us along with Terry Stroh, McGough, and all this, trying to marry these up to a manner that aligns with your construction desires on both projects. But that has a unique complexity to it. But I just wanted to give you an overview of that.
Maybe you could explain this. You have passenger facility charge here, and this one now has cash reserves. And my understanding is we put the cash in, we'd be paid back from the passenger facility charge.
Correct. One of the reasons.
That's all I want to know.
Yeah.
That's all. The other thing, again, the challenge that we've got here is on this 153 million. We've got what we control is at 22.7 or 26.3, and this passenger facility charge there.
Right.
So the point being, we had a big meeting last week, and our contractor and engineer need to get together and explain to us how this project's going to get rolled out. My original thinking was that they would start, build like crazy, and finish, and we write them a check on the way. The cash isn't there to do that. And so what we need to know as we're going forward is how this thing is going to be phased, which Tom indicated this how all airports are done. And the key is the phasing and the money is so close that you never notice that it stops. But I think that's your summary here, right?
That is our summary. One of the things on passenger facility charges, the reason I took it off, Rick, is I had questions from people and they think PFCs is a cash pot of money. And all PFCs is the airport. Sean applies for.
I don't really care how we do it, but it's important for us to have the same language, the same numbers, and see how this evolves. So,
okay.
Well, the other one, Tom, that you should address is the direct allocation of competitive versus alternative.
When on the state side of it, my understanding when I came on board, the airport and everybody met with Kyle Warner was in the meeting, and they asked Kyle Warner how much you're willing to give, and more or less Kyle said, we'll give you your matching share, which was roughly $4.3 million. Well, from my perspective, historically, an airport of your size, the importance of this project to both the city and the state of North Dakota, we would be crazy not to ask for more money. There is precedent set where there has been funding given to Minot, Williston, Dickinson, Watford City, that have been special allocations of some sort or another.
And what were those amounts?
They're big. They're notable.
40, 50.
50 million.
Williston was just under $60 million.
So that's one that, swings a long ways from 40 million to zero.
Oh, 100%. And that's where, when I came in, I said, look, let's do this. So what we're working on is a strategy with Fargo, a project at Grand Forks that we're referring to are more a generational project where you look at a project of this terminal, it's something that comes up every 20 to 30 years. So we're working that along with the project at Dickinson. There's some political gains for that as well as balancing the east versus west demand and things like that. So we think this will work. Kyle Warner, the director, I won't put words into his mouth. So far, he has not jumped in our way and said this is a bad idea. He's on board. Our goal is
in Washington, presented it to Hoven as the state is going to $40 million for this, and that it's Fargo's turn, and that the other airports all will support this because Fargo has supported as they've each gone through. Is that what you read, Rick?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I'm just kind of smiling because I think clearly what the airport authority needs to do is to fund a campaign for one of its board members. And we should decide if we should be at the state level or the federal level. So where we're going to get the most money, that's what we need to figure out.
You have my vote.
Thank you.
Anyway, is there any question on it, or did I cover anything?
Yeah, Mr. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so just walk them through, let's say on February 6th, they announced the grant. We've asked for 19, we're going to get something. So from the time of announcement until we can draw down the first penny can take 5 to 6 months.
Yeah,
We're talking about cash flow during this whole time. We got bills that are due, but yet we don't have access to the federal funds for months after they announce the grant. That's just how the system works.
in our timeline, when we put together this timeline for you, we're going to try to capture that in there so you see when did you ask for it, when are you probably likely to get an announcement. And again, you have to realize these are at the whim of the government. And then when do we think we actually can draw cash? Because there are 3 different dates. Because a lot of times when a lot of these are announced by a congressional person. So let's say Senator Hogan called Sean and said, "Look, we got you $15 million. Look, good. How quickly can we draw on it?" There's a federal process for sending in the application, getting through, making sure the environmental, the CADXs are all done, everything. And so there's a delay in that. We just need to make sure it's baked into the cash flow. So
we'll figure that out. This becomes part of the CFO services again, because what I don't want to get us down another rabbit hole, but we do have the ability to do a construction loan or a line of credit that we can draw against. And again, we'd have to make sure everything lines up so that if we pay for things out of a line of credit, that it can be reimbursed. But that all becomes part of this whole cash management and how we handle the input and output of that. So.
In the state strategy, we show 40 million. That's just for the terminal ask. We'd also look at an additional 20 million for the South GA issue. So it's a total of 60 million. I'm thinking we should ask for more on the terminal side of it. Leave the 20 million there. I think we maybe should be closer to 70 million in the total ask from the state. But we'll see. The goal is to get it in the governor's budget. So he has his state of the state today. I think there's a good indication. Kyle Warner will be meeting with the governor's staff on strategic thing for budget preparation at the end of February. If we get it in the governor's budget, I think we're in good shape. So,
like I say, I mean, the way that goes is the governor will have a budget, but the real governor's budget will come out after November.
Yeah.
Whoever's governor then will tweak, but most of this work will happen ahead of time.
So thank you, Tom.
Okay, thank you.
Brandon, I don't know if Brandon has anything, but
I had one question.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of if there's a hiccup, where do you see there could be a possible hiccup? Just, I mean, for the benefit of the board. So we're not blindsided. Your worst case scenario, where could a hiccup be?
Right now I see anytime you're fighting for discretionary ATP, the size of those are going to be a big lift for the FAA. What I see is the most likely hiccup is 3 years worth of funding versus 2 years of funding. So let's say we're asking for, I don't know the exact numbers up there, $50 million. If we don't get it in 2 years, maybe we get it in the third year. So you get a chunk at maybe $20, $25 million a year discretionary ATP mixture.
So then we're front end funding that out of our pocket.
Well, the concern is ATP and discretionary cannot be reimbursed unless you have what the only exemption they have is called a cold weather condition. We're looking at the likelihood of needing it and the ability to use it. We've already briefed the FAA on our desire to consider it, asked them for their opinion on if they have any objections and why. There are some risks that we want to make sure that we barely clear out to you at that, or clarify to you at that time. But that is the biggest thing, is looking at that, getting the sequencing down, working with McGough is critical so that we can align this funding to the best of our ability with the cycle of construction. But that's where I see it is more of a timing issue is mine. So.
What's the rationale for the FAA not allowing airports to reimburse with discretionary?
Written in a law. Most of these items are written in law. So if you had somebody that was in like the legislature that knew this, that we could work with them on changing those laws, that would help us out quite a bit.
Yeah, we got a big list.
Yeah, big list. Yeah. All right. So,
really quickly, Oliver, on that pre-con call, I had asked on behalf of the board if we could get the the blueprints that came out on the 19th?
It came out last night.
It did. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Hi. I I have an email all ready to go. I was going to send electronically to board members of bid package 2. It's pretty big, so it's going to be like a link to download the files. There's I think 4 or 5 volumes of drawings and then 3 volumes of specs. It's a lot, but if you know what you're looking for, it's in there.
Thank you.
Are you providing too just sort of black line drawings here? So as we look at this and can see positioning and scale and everything like that.
I'm sorry, what, John?
Floor plans or, we don't need a complete set of blueprints, but as we're discussing the restaurant, the food area, where it is, and as we're looking at all this scale and everything, we don't need detailed construction plans, but it would help, as we try to visualize this and see different things.
Yeah, we can certainly print out the floor plans, the overall floor plans, first, second floor, and just put those on a whiteboard so they're readily available. Would that work?
I think each of the board members would like to kind of have it as you're trying to say, okay, here's where the bathrooms are, here's how everything's flowing as this project continues. And
we could probably walk into that meeting on the 1st a little bit more educated and prepared for the conversation.
Sure. Yeah. Would you rather have that than the whole comprehensive set? Or do you want both? Or
I'd like to see where the bathrooms are, where the pet relief station is, the capacity of the restaurant. You know what I mean? That type of
thing. Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll get that over to you.
All right. And we no action at this point. We'll probably have another bid package though at our first February meeting. That one will be critical. All right, item number 8.
Before we get to that, Mr. Chair, I would just like to thank Sean and the staff for the speakers.
Yeah.
This is like awesome. It's been able to hear everything that people have said, and I think
Darren did it all.
right. Thank you. It's really, really good.
Sight on sound.
Yeah. No, I mean,
you the man.
You're the man. Thank you.
All right, we've got some travel authorization, legislative conference, March 14th, 15th in Washington.
Move we approve.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Leadership conference, Port Charlotte.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. YND conference, March 3rd to 5th.
So do we have to indicate like who's going to these or? Okay.
I'll second the motion on the fly-in.
Okay.
Will that be like Delta to Minneapolis to Grand Forks? Or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I-29.
Yeah, Rapid City. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. With item 11 is looking at exploring the electronic sign reader board sign, and we have an update on that.
Yeah, so I sent you an email with the map that I got through Melissa Gallrep down at the city. First, as you know, it's a message center, not a billboard, so it's non-revenue generating, but our staff went out and did some measurements. There's very limited space. When you look at the drawing, there's a green line that shows the property. There could be a little spot right off the southwest edge of the bike trail, but just north of where the sanitary sewer force main easement is. That's a potential location, but I haven't heard back from Hausauer and Miller yet at the wastewater plant on how far back we need from there. I've gone through 1 or 2 drafts of the RFP from Flint, and I'm guessing that they'll probably be sending that out yet later this month or early next month. I see Kelsey and Madison are on here from Flint, but they'll go out into the market and see what's there, and then whoever's proposing is going to have to find a spot, put a stake in the ground and say, here's where it can be. It has to be more than 60 feet from the current entrance sign that's there. Otherwise, that has to come out if it's just not a message center. I guess that's the update on it. But it's not a revenue producing sign as was earlier discussed.
I think it's informative, but that's kind of what we're looking for is to see what might be available there. We are a unique entity as a city subdivision. One of the most confusing signs and how it's used is the Fargo Dome sign. So there's some leeway there that may be available. The other one is the Air Museum sign. But this will allow us to continue through this process and start to see where this may line up. Any other discussions, questions?
I thank you for the update because we talked about the RFP a couple meetings ago. So thank you.
Okay. Construction security update. Everybody tired of it? Good. Nothing. All right. So let's get rid of the chairperson and fire him. And we know that's unanimous. So, we would need a motion to elect the new chair for 2024, and that starts when?
Next February meeting is when the new chair takes over.
All right, next February meeting. So it's going to have to be a planned coronation, pageantry.
Motion to elect Monsieur Capitan.
Okay. Motion, is there a second?
I second.
All in favor?
I'd like to hear what he's going to do this next year, Chairman.
Okay.
I'm going to bring lots of money.
How's that?
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Congratulations, Jim. Gavel will be passed. And now we need a motion to elect the vice chair.
Motion to elect Paula Vice.
All right, we have motion, second.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Congratulations. And
Chair, when is the first meeting in February?
It's the second Tuesday, so Valentine's Day. So bring your chocolate.
Which is
14th.
14th. I will be on the 14th. You'll have to chair that because I'll be in Washington at a legislative conference.
Oh, I'm going to be in.
It's actually the 13th.
Yeah, the 13th.
Well, we can't wait to further transition until you guys are back.
Yeah, I'm going to be in the Dominican Republic.
I'll be gone from the 9th through the 15th.
Are you going to be here, Rick?
That's pretty much exactly the same days I'm going to be gone, Jim.
Which Rick were you asking first?
Rick, Mr. Burt, Mr. Egan, are you going to be here on the 13th?
Okay,
Will
so
you be campaigning?
Yeah. Or we won't have a meeting.
I can probably call
I
in.
think I could probably call in. I don't know. It depends on what my meetings are in Washington.
Okay.
So what is the date for the next one?
February
The
13th.
13th.
February 13th.
My plan is to be here.
So we'll have a quorum.
I'm sure I can call in.
Yes.
Just one thing to keep in the back of your minds, and that is, I think if Oliver was here, he'd remind us all that for GMP 1, we have until the 20th for contracts. So we would need to get your approval prior to February 20th in order to move forward with GMP 1.
Correct.
So I think you have to have a meeting of some sort between now and the 20th.
So for the 13th.
What is that? What is that? BP1?
That is the precast. It's the footings, everything for the expansion from an exterior.
Well, I think, again, from my perspective, we need to have you and our engineer together on all that. So I really don't want to start voting to go ahead with construction until we see how these things are lining up. So, and I think that decision can be made really, really quickly.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Even if we had to call a special meeting to make that decision. But
And I think our plan has been to, with Mead and Hunt, to show you that in the next week to 10 days, But if you're not thinking of having a meeting in the first part of February, then we're not going to make that 20th.
Oh, no, we will.
Okay.
Put it this way, I'll make sure that I bust out of whatever meeting, if I have a meeting at that time, and call in.
Okay.
I'm sure I can get internet work.
And we might want to revote given this new information. All right, so we will figure out a way. We will need a special meeting. Is that what you're anticipating here before the February 13th meeting?
No, I think we can do it on the 13th,
Okay,
but
we
we
can
just
do
need
all-
to be up to speed on everything so we know.
Okay.
I think.
So we'd have to be prepared on the 13th. Proceed ahead with
And I would
that.
say, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but we can have a teleconference call to approve that if we need to. Right? I mean, we do it public just like this.
Sure,
We
it
could
might have
all
to be public, but yeah.
we could all get on there and approve that. If people are not here.
We'll get it done on the 13th.
Okay. All right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
No, same thing. Meeting adjourned.